and welcome to another Blog 4K podcast. It's myself, Jonathan Polfried. I'm joined by Lucy Smith.
Hello there.
And today we are talking about Man of Steel. We saw it yesterday at the cinema. What was your first impressions of it?
Well, before we go any further, obviously we're going to be talking spoilers, so if you haven't seen it,
Oh yeah, good
don't
point.
listen.
Yeah, that is a good point actually.
We are going to be
seen
talking about everything that happens in the film, and I luckily didn't get any spoilers. I kind of stayed away from that. I tend to spoil myself with these things, so I did go in fresh face, so do if you can. But generally, my opinion of the film, I really liked it. I'm not sure what I was expecting, because I'm a big fan of Superman. I've watched Smallville avidly. I've always loved Superman as the superhero. I think he is the ultimate. Come on, let's not lie about that.
Yeah.
He is the superhero, and he is a tough guy to get on the screen, I think, since the originals, which are sort of a different time in Hollywood.
Well, there's been several attempts, isn't there,
Yeah.
at Superman, and every time it's never really come across that
Yeah,
great.
well, the original.
And to be fair,
the
all
first
superhero
two
films.
they're so bad they're good, because it's the sort of the era it was made. And Christopher Reeve was fantastic as Superman. I think he is Superman is in many in one's eyes, but it is, if they made that film now, it wouldn't work, because it's just the evolution of Hollywood.
Yeah.
But generally, I love the film. I think there was some parts they could have done better and explored more, but generally, I thought it was a good. However long it was in the cinema, it's quite long.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel over long. I think it had a good pacing to it generally, and I think I really enjoyed it.
Oh, there you go.
That's the end of the
Podcast over.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I have to agree on that. It was a good film. We'll get into a few points about maybe some of the details, what they did well and what they didn't do so well, and also just generally superhero films in general.
Yeah.
I'm comparing DC comics versus Marvel, because there certainly is a difference between the two.
Oh, vastly, yeah.
And also the influences of Batman, which I think is the one big topic that everyone's been talking about. They're saying, oh, it's been Batmanified.
I don't think it's been Batmanified, because they're totally different heroes, even though they are sort of two sides of the same coin.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Batman.
there's a general trend for everything to be a bit more gritty now, isn't there? I mean, you can see just in the new kind of clothing that Superman wears.
The pants have gone.
Yeah, the pants have gone. But then that's fair enough. That's just part of the evolution of, like you say, evolution of Hollywood and how it changes in terms of styles and everything.
Yeah, I think what I liked about this film predominantly was it took ownership of itself. It didn't try too hard to be a Superman film. Obviously, I'll try and reword that a bit better. It obviously was a Superman film, but it didn't try and it stood on its own 2 feet. It stood as a standalone very well. I think even if they weren't doing sequels, it would be a very nice. It's not like Marvel films, which I think overdo it in the fact that, look, there's a sequel coming up. There's the bit at the end of the credits.
True, yeah.
They kind of lead on the fact that, oh no, you got to go and watch the next one so you get the full story. This one really stood on its own 2 feet, and I think it really worked well as a contained film.
Well, yeah, because this one really was about the introduction of Superman, wasn't it? I mean, it was all about
Kal-El.
Well, from birth, literally.
Yeah, literally birth.
Literally birth.
That seems to be a trend at the moment.
Yeah.
Births.
All the way to him finally becoming Superman, and right at the end. Obviously, you have already seen this, so if you haven't, then why the hell are you already still listening to this podcast? But if you didn't know, because right at the end, you see him as working.
This is a weird
as a
link,
journalist.
but it reminds me of Assassin's Creed 2 in some ways. I don't know if you've played that.
Yeah.
But it starts literally with the birth of Ezio.
Actually, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just as soon as we saw a birthing scene, it led back to that. But I think it's important because it is Superman's film. It's Man of Steel, and I think, it was a really insight into him. Not necessarily him discovering his powers and discovering him becoming Superman. It's sort of more like him embracing that who he is, because as a viewer of Smallville, a lot of Smallville was him struggling with him being Kryptonian, which it touched on in the film, but also him discovering his powers and sort of each step leading to him becoming the Superman. But it was like he just sort of put on the suit and he was Superman, and that was quite nice to sort of avoid that awkward moment where he's sort of Superman, but not like in Smallville.
Yeah.
And him just literally saying, okay, this is who I am, and I'm awesome, and I've got all these powers, and I can do good stuff with it. And that was really nice to see. There was no weird internal conflict.
They got across his kind of realization point, not him as being a superhero, but certainly him with his certain powers and being different. in that scene with his mum in the school where she tells him to focus and focus his mind and everything, and that kind of is the point. And also then it's reused later on in the film, isn't it, with
let's talk details. Okay, so let's kind of do it a bit chronologically. Did you like the Krypton bit at the start?
Yes. Actually, I think it's probably sort of my favourite part, or at
I
least what I like
good.
about the film, maybe compared to what they could have done, which they could have skipped over that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times Krypton is sort of this sort of unknown because we're sort of seeing it from Clark's view, because he doesn't know anything about Krypton except that he's Kryptonian. So it was really nice to see sort of Krypton and see some flying dragons and Russell Crowe running around and stuff. And I think Russell Crowe was one of the highlights of the film for me.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the bits that, script-wise, I think he's probably got all the best script in the film.
Yeah.
And the lines that he's put in there, I think, were the best parts of anyone saying anything. It made sense, what he was saying. And
it was really nice to see him, actually, because I initially thought he would only be in that
yeah.
And that was it. I thought he would sort of only have a small role at the opening, that we knew he existed. So it was nice to see him crop up as this sort of, even though it was a sort of computer-generated version of Jor-El, it was still nice to see him. And that scene with Lois in the ship was one of the highlights for me.
Yeah.
It's sort of the action there was action, obviously, but it was really subtle action with Lois sort of running around and Russell Crowe or Jor-El sort of just being this sort of computer guiding her almost like a sat nav almost. It was brilliant, and I loved that bit so much. That really put a smile on my face. Let's go on to Lois, actually, because I mentioned her. I thought Amy Adams was brilliant. I think anything Amy Adams does is fantastic. She takes ownership of the role, and she makes Lois. Lois Lane is a difficult role to play, because it's hard to make her, she's always portrayed as this spunky, hard-headed, confident journalist who gets the job done, which is a good character trait in itself, but because there's so many iterations, you've got to make it your own as well. I think it's the same if you're playing Superman, to be honest. You've got to they're both iconic roles in their own right. And I just loved the bit when she walked in saying, "I'm a Pulitzer journalist." That was just typical of her, and I think she really had couple of good one-liners, and she had a really important role. She wasn't just the damsel in distress who was making Munoz eyes over Superman.
Actually, that was good.
She had a pivotal role in the plot, and she kind of she led the plot. She was very important, and I think it was nice and almost refreshing to see.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was really her that helped make Superman become Superman, wasn't it?
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah, because she ensured that he would actually go ahead with it rather than going along with his dad's, or his Earth dad's wishes, which was to stay secret about his powers.
I was a bit confused about that. I can understand where Jonathan Kent was coming from. Like, I think he had to be the sort of the foil to Russell Crowe's dad sort of thing. They were sort of totally opposites, but they were both viewed as his father, which was nice to see. There wasn't this sort of competition, who is my real dad. Even though he obviously had a bit when Clark shouted at him in the car, but it was sort of like they both were legit fathers.
That's another thing, actually. It's nice that they've respected that part of it, because that happens a lot in films where you get the discovery that there's not the real dad, and then you get the whole, like you say, the daddy problem thing.
Yeah, you're not my real father.
And we could have wasted half an hour of the film just trying to organise that, and him trying to become friends with his dad, and he dies and all that.
I did think Kevin Costner, it's nice to see him again. I did think he's been in a film for a while, and he's one of my favourite actors. And I think he did the good speeches, the preachy speeches. There was a lot of them, but I kind of enjoyed them. I think they were nicely written. And I did think the bit where the tornado was happening, and I think that's a questionable whether if Superman could have saved him or not. There is a sort of, could he have, arguably Superman runs faster than light and he could have rescued him, but that's me being a technicality. But I did think him sort of saying, "No, son, don't save me," thing, that was a really nice subtle bit of acting from Kevin, and I think that was really nice. First time basis.
And it does explain why then why he hasn't become Superman before this point. It explains why he's kept quiet, why he hasn't got in the public eye.
I do think Kevin Costner, or Jonathan Kent, was sort of he was sort of a bit err on the side of caution, but I think he had a legit reason for it, because you think about it, if it kind of made a very good point with what would happen if this did happen. And I think with the whole aliens coming down and the UFOs, the journalists and the Pentagon keeping it quiet. It's actually what it seemed realistic. If this happened, this would be the events that occurred. And we haven't even touched on Zod yet. I think, I don't know, I'm a bit torn with Zod. I think he had good intentions in his own mind. You know, he's a product of his
Krypton it's an interesting one, because in many ways his arguments were probably correct in terms of like, and it's exactly what, you know, humans would do in any situation.
Yeah.
They would look after their own people first. They wouldn't.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting, and I don't know if it was me just really looking at the film with a bit of a fine comb, but that Zod and Jor-El were both sort of engineered to be like these people. So Jor-El was the scientist and Zod was the soldier.
Yeah.
And they both approach it in the same way. We got to protect Krypton in totally vastly different ways.
Yeah.
And it was more like, I found that Zod was the sort of guy who was resigning to his roots and his genetic identity, and Jor-El was the one fighting it, trying to be better than what he's been engineered to. So him trying to, you know, he's they've given birth to Kal-El, I completely blank, and he pushing to make the Kryptons better, because obviously they have got to the peak of their civilization, sort of. Obviously they've run out of natural resources and it's sort of the end for them, so it's sort of nice to him trying to break free of that, what was their ruin actually. So that was kind of nice to see, and it would kind of put humanity in a nice light without them being all sort of cheesily smiling at camera. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't all this sort of saving kids thing, which is I can go on to later, but
I mean, that is a good point. It's quite a nice thing about this film. They haven't done the whole outcast thing too much either. Although they kept obviously saying that was his he
chose to be an outcast, I think.
But there was never any bit though where it was kind of, oh god, he's a danger to society. Although they had to kill him because they were worried about, you know, they tried to kill him because they thought he was a danger, but not in the sense where normally where they're on the run. Like in Batman, he's on the run at one point, and you know they hide him away because you know they don't want to. Yeah. And it's all of that kind of stuff, which they skipped all that, which is nice, because that usually what happens in superhero films. They go, oh, he's the weird guy who's causing all these issues, go away, kind of thing. Although, to be fair, they would have good reason to in this film. It is different,
though, because Superman represents a lot. He's a metaphor for what humanity can be. He's almost a metaphor for Christ, which in Superman Returns is literally very literal. You know, in Superman Returns, you know, there's several instances where Superman is represented as not just godlike, but as a savior, as Christ. And this is sort of the scene in the church, I think, is very similar. It kind of does sort of reference that, because I think people would view him with that sort of religious, like Jesus, savior, save the planet, kill myself to save the planet sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting, that side of it as well. And I think they only slightly touched on it, but it's still a very prominent thing throughout all the Superman films, in my opinion. But carrying on with Zod, I do think he wasn't very memorable. Like the original Zod in the films, he had some fantastic one-liners. I can't think of any more, but he's very nasty, and he's almost, I would argue, the Joker of the Superman world. He is this merciless killer, and they tried to make us sympathise with him a little bit too much. But going back on what I said, I think that is important roots for the story, but I do think they could have made him a bit nastier. And you know, going to Star Trek, for example, let's look at Khan. He broke Thing's leg and squished the guy's face, and that was pretty brutal. We don't really see any brutality in this.
No,
just him
no.
Sort of,
everything he does is kind of within reason almost.
Threats. Yeah, within reason, all these threats. And obviously, leaving Metropolis with that weird gravity gun thing was kind of nasty, and it was pretty extreme. But I do think it's going to this destruction of the city thing. I think it was a bit unnecessary.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the point that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And that is, it's a theme in nearly all superhero films and action films at the moment. To be fair, it's not just this film, but this kind of ridiculous destruction of entire cities. Probably because someone's invented a new technique to be able to make particles look really cool. But it's getting a bit much now.
Yeah, I do think it kind of, hate to sound like the bearer of bad news, I do think it resigns with 9/11. I think especially Americans and everybody who remembers it, if you see a building falling down, there's a bit of you in the back of your mind that triggers, and you think of 9/11, and it makes you think like, oh crap. So I do think the building falling down thing is a bit of a metaphor, because this is how bad it can be.
But the problem is when you start knocking down like 10 different buildings in about 4 different fight scenes, it starts getting a bit to the point where do they even matter anymore?
Yeah,
Those buildings
exactly.
are just a building.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people have pointed out online, just looking from this morning on Twitter, and all these critics saying the amount of damage Superman causes. And, you know,
He kills all these people.
He inadvertently kills
Yeah.
these people. And, you know, one of the great things about all the other Superman films, and I would argue Smallville as well, even when there's this huge destruction going on, he's still, oh, quick, I've got to go and save those kids, or quick, stop the Daily Planet globe falling on a load of people, like in Superman Returns.
Yeah.
You know, he's still got his eye on humanity. And this one, he was sort of, I don't know, not even thinking about it. Maybe it's something they will
Maybe
follow up
yeah.
in the next films, because it was sort of like he hasn't really earned the role as a savior.
Although they did end it with him requesting that, didn't they? I mean, that was the thing that at the end of the film, he's there saying, "I want to be here, helping you."
Yes.
And you kind of wonder maybe they could have used that, waited for the next film to kind of say, "Well, no, hang on, we don't want you because you've just killed all these people."
I do think, I think that's a very good point. And I do think killing Zod was an interesting choice. Apparently the script writers did sort of were a bit torn on that, because it was an extreme thing to do, and I think you could arguably say Superman's broken the rule that Batman had never broken, which is kill someone. And it's interesting because I thought it was very good to see, actually, because I think a lot of films do this, I will not kill anybody. I'm not saying anything killing is good, because when they do kill people, it's like they don't get any backlash from that. And in this one, you felt like as soon as Clark did that, he felt he had to, and he was pushed to that point because of saving that family from the heat vision of Zod or whatever.
Yeah.
And you really felt the despair for him actually killing the last Kryptonian, but I guess you need that for him to become the last son of Krypton.
And to be fair, it makes sense, because I mean, it was kind of like, well, if he hadn't killed him, then all those other people that had died in vain, kind of thing.
Yeah, I did think
that,
it was.
All the buildings that got destructed, all the people that, you'd have been a bit like, well, okay, what? So suddenly now he's suddenly got conscious when it's someone who actually probably deserves to be killed. Yet all those people who just got collateral damage.
I think, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know what I was expecting with the sort of.
But it is kind of superhero. Like you say, superhero films normally do kind of.
I do tend to. Yeah, they do tend to.
No.
They stop them and beat them up enough so they've stopped, and then lock them up, and then in a couple of films they come back.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way it is. So I think it's kind of good that they've sort of put an end to the Zod, and then I think with the sequel, I think arguably is going to be Lex Luthor. All the little Easter eggs of LexCorp, which I really loved. It put a big smile on my face to see. I was like, yeah, I spotted one, and there's quite a few Easter eggs actually. I think there was 3 or 4 times we saw LexCorp, and there was. I listened to the Empire podcast, and there was apparently, I didn't see this, so there was Wayne Enterprises on that satellite when Zod and Superman went up. So I'm not sure how inadvertently that's going to link to a Justice League movie, if ever. But I do think we're supposed to take from that this is a world where Batman exists, which is kind of cool.
This is where everyone goes now back to watching.
Pausing frames.
The Dark Knight films and have a look, see if they can spot for any.
And also in one of the offices, when that office where Zod was burning things with his eyes, apparently there was a poster with Batman on or something like that. I think it would be a Blu-ray freeze the frame sort of job. I don't think that you blink you miss it, literally. So that was all these little Easter eggs I thought were really good, and they added a level of humour that I think a lot of people have complained about the lack of humour. I think the humour was there, but it was a bit more subtle. I think there was some funny bits that were sort of not like slapstick humor, but we're kind of just like tongue-in-cheek. Oh, look at this! Like when Superman hits that 106 days without instance, that put a smile on my face.
When they landed on that building site, I noticed it straight away. That sign,
and then as he hit it,
I was
it went back to 0.
Yeah,
that was just brilliant.
That was a nice little subtle.
And like Lois with the printer copier, and there's it's not blatant obvious humor, but I think it wouldn't have suited this film if they had the slapstick humor. I think more humor will probably come in the next one with Clark being Clark Kent in the Daily Planet.
They'll use those moments.
That is obviously going to happen, but I think him the humor just wouldn't have worked. I just think it wouldn't have suited the tone of the film, which is this sort of Superman takes himself very seriously. So I do think if Lex Luthor comes back in the next one, which I think is probably what's going to happen, Lex Luthor sort of takes the piss out of Superman quite a lot. He's sort of this guy who doesn't take him seriously, and Superman does. So it'll be kind of nice to see that, and that'll probably bring back some more humour if people were so desperate for humour. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this film was a good setup for Superman, a trilogy or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it explained the entire backstory again in a nice, neat way. You know, and like I said, we got a lot about Krypton and all about that, which was nice to see.
Yeah.
Learn more about his father,
But
all those
also,
kind of bits.
I loved about it was that it wasn't treating you like an idiot if you didn't know Superman, or if you did know Superman, which I'd like to think I knew. I'm not totally like the one to. I know the basics, and it wasn't like felt like it was dumbing it down for anybody to follow, because everybody knows Superman. And I think there's a lot of films recently I've noticed. I can't think of any on the top of my head. Like Star Trek was one of them again. It was sort of like, oh, this is this and this and this, and it's sort of listing this backstory, and it's like we don't need that. You know, or reiterating points we already know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the only hope is, I guess, that they don't mess up like Star Trek did, because the first start, you know, when they reset the Star Trek again with JJ again, and it was great. You know, it did a great reset, and it was all brand new. Everyone was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" You know, people didn't like Star Trek before, suddenly were enjoying it.
Yeah,
and everyone thought, "Oh, can't wait for the second one," and it just didn't hit the same level. And hopefully, it's not the case with this one, because because I think when we saw with the Batman films and Batman Begins, and then, you know, Dark Knight films, I mean, really, Batman Begins wasn't that big, was it, really, compared to the other two?
No.
It was kind of like they did that, and then suddenly they stepped up a whole nother level.
Yeah, I think
with the Dark Knight.
Yeah, I think hopefully they'll do the same thing, because I think that'll work very well. You know, with the whole step up from Batman Begins, which literally what this is. It's a setup. It is this basis of story, laying the foundations, not really going into complete character development, which I would have liked to see more of.
Yeah,
they did gloss over a little bit, but
once again, that's kind of a general problem with a lot of films.
That was they were
like
more
at the
action,
moment.
less talking, which is not something that sits well with me. But that's just a personal opinion. But I do think they set up enough for a lead in to go, like with Dark Knight, go straight into the action. We know everything. We've seen it. We've seen the prequel. If we don't, we're not stupid enough to not know what's going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, lead on to the second one. Because I do arguably think, you know, Kal-El putting on the glasses, going into the Daily Planet, getting introduced to Lois, who knows his secret, which is lovely. I like to see that. Was the, like, same as the end of Batman Begins with the Joker card, leading on to the next film. So I think the next film is going to be predominantly, initially, the first hour or so, him adjusting to life in the Daily Planet, and maybe Lex Luthor becoming this sort of guy who is repairing the city or something like that. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But I do think, going back to the character development, they did gloss over a lot. I think there wasn't enough root in the Lois and Clark relationship, which was a bit of a shame.
Yeah, there's a bit of a weird.
I don't think that kiss came out of nowhere for me.
That was the only quiet moment they had together, really, before the end of the film. I mean, it was really a case of, you know, action, and then it had this brief moment, and then he still had to fly off like instantly.
It was too brief for me, and it felt like the film was very vastly edited down.
Yeah. There's one bit, it was relatively near the start, and I can't remember the exact point, but it really did suddenly cut. Like you could tell they had cut something out where there should have been.
I think they cut out a lot
scene.
of Krypton scene. But I did find the Krypton scene very good. Going back to that, I think I felt very involved and connected to Krypton. And when that
I'm glad they did have that.
Lara and, you know, the volcano going off and everything, I thought that was very powerful. So you felt like this is something awful that's happened, even though it's not our planet, that doesn't exist. You felt involved and invested in its fate. And so that was a very good opening to the film, and I did like the ending. Going back to the ending, I did like it. I think that was really nice to see, you know, and I think it was very clever to shake it up a little bit with having him becoming a Superman first, then becoming Clark later. You know, going back to Kill Bill 2, I think, when Bill says something like Clark Kent is the disguise and Superman who he is really. So I think that was really nice. They reiterated at that point, because he is different in that sense. Yeah,
that's nice they've done it that way around, because you could have easily done the whole, like, say, discovering Superman, or that he can do all these superpowers during his life, but it's nice that they did it that way around rather than the other way around.
I think the more I think about this film, the more I like it, actually.
Yeah,
You
I think
know,
it was good.
I was sort of thinking about it last night after the film, and I sort of thought, initially I thought I liked it, but the more and more I sort of think about it, and the more I think I look at it, I did like it. I think there was some points that sort of made me go, ouch, like some of the dialogue during the fighting. Oh God.
Yeah, there are a few one-liners in there that are a bit.
What were the Zod and Superman? What were they? They were so bad. They were like, only one of us can survive, and
Yes,
the
there
other
was that
must
line,
die. And it was sort of like, I will stop you, Zod. And it was just like, oh God, this is awful. But I guess that's just.
I mean, the biggest
script
the biggest
weakness.
problems with the films are kind of the general problems that all action and superhero films.
Yeah,
are
I
having at the moment.
can't.
It's too much action.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where it started happening. This kind of the action film's got to be 2 hours long, and they've got to have action all the way through them for say an hour and 45
Well, I would
minutes of
argue,
them.
how long was that film?
Didn't feel, like I said, didn't feel too long. That
It
was
didn't
one
feel
good
too
thing.
long, but I did feel
But
like
they
they
could- I would
put
have-
too much action in
I would
it.
have liked to have swapped one action scene, because I think it's probably about 4 or 5 big action scenes in that film. I'd have swapped one of those for a good dialogue scene.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that would have really helped.
I think we missed a really good dialogue, at least one.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
there was obviously a couple, 2 or 3 with Lois. That was mainly her role, was talking about stuff because she's a journalist. And but it felt like they glossed over some of the sort of the connection between Lois and Clark, because I think the thing is, the Lois and Clark relationship is very, very important. It's not just a love interest. Lois Lane is her own character in her own right, but she is the emotional tether to Superman. It's like, I read a quote from one of the comics that really is important. It's sort of like, how do you defeat someone like Superman when he's immortal? How you do it is you break his heart. So Lois is his weakness, and not in the sense that, oh, she's my damsel in distress, I can't be with her because she's my weakness. She is also his strength, and she gives him heart, she gives him purpose, and gives him a tether to humanity. Even though he's grown up as a human and he is 90% human, at the end of the day, when he's got that suit on and he's flying around, he is not human. So Lois is that sort of link, and I think they really, hopefully, are going to go more into their relationship, more the development of their relationship, because I think you could argue their relationship in this film, was just from circumstance, from the action, from the distress, and it's sort of
like she decided to just pursue him as a
because it was her curiosity that
curiosity
proved
about
it was her curiosity
these
that
weird events kind of thing.
She sort of put her journalist hat on, and she pursued him, and then obviously saw the side after him explaining what happened to his dad, and that was the only bit that really kind of had the emotional bit in it. Other bits were just sort of circumstance. Like I say, they were on the ship together. He saves her a couple of times from falling twice. Yeah,
that's a good point, actually.
That's the only time she needs saving is when
twice.
she's falling, because she can't fly, so that's all right. But I do think, they really glossed over it a little bit too. I was happy with it generally. I do think Amy Adams and Henry Cavill did have some good chemistry on screen. They worked well together, but they could have been so much more.
You just wanted a bit more because they do work well together, and it would have been just nice to have that kind of 10-15 minutes where we could have actually found out, rather than 10-15 minutes of buildings falling down.
It was just nice to have seen Lois say something cheeky towards him, because she always says these cracking one-liners, and we saw the one about measuring dicks, which was great. Yeah. That made me smile. And she does have some fantastic one-liners in the comics and in every iteration, and I just think she could have said something to him just to get that relationship a bit more solid. But I do think she was great, and I do think, going to Henry Cavill, I did think he did very well. I think the limitations that he wasn't Superman wasn't necessarily his fault. I think it was the script's fault, like we've said.
Yeah.
They are skipping over the emotional core of it, but I do think he looked great in the suit. And
that's Lucy's opinion.
Well, as that captain says at the end.
Oh God, yeah, that was a bit
hard.
cheesy.
That was very bad. But it's sort
was like, oh dear God.
It's sort of like, you're a professional military woman.
Yeah.
Get a grip. And it's sort of funny that they left it to the end to point out how hard he was, or kind of hard. So that was quite funny. But I do think a lot of things worked in this film, and I think it was largely a success. It wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
But I do think it leads on to a great sequel that hopefully will be out soon.
Yeah, I mean that's the big hope. Hopefully, it'll be a good follow-up. That's the biggest problem with all these films, isn't it? Is how they follow the next film.
I think if anybody
sometimes
can
it's a
write a
hit,
good
sometimes it's a
sequel,
miss.
is David S. Goyer, who obviously wrote Batman, all the Batmans, and he is a very talented writer, and I think he can. He's a good writer in the fact that he leads off well with a sequel. So I'm largely confident with that. They have started the sequel, and I think they've got quite a clear mind with what they're doing with it, with all the Easter eggs. So I do think Lex Luthor is going to come back, and who's going to play him? I don't know.
Well, yeah, that would be interesting.
I was trying to think about it because in Superman Returns we had Kevin Spacey, I think he was brilliant as Lex Luthor. I think he was the ultimate. Obviously, there's the original ones with Gene Hackman, or if I just completely fucked that up. I
don't know. I won't be able to.
I don't know. I'm DB that, but maybe edit that bit out. But so I'm not embarrassed. But I do think who could play him with the same sort of spontaneity and almost funny, but maniacal side to him.
Yeah.
Is difficult. I just can't think of anybody right now, to be honest. Like all the good old actors, like Russell Crowe and Kevin Spacey have already been in it, so they're taken. I think there's probably someone out there. I wonder if they'll do someone slightly unknown again, and just sort of really, again, put their sort of hate against the sort of the bitterness of humanity up against him, because obviously he's only looking at it with the rose-tinted glasses that humanity are great because I'm a human practically, but I think it would be nice to see the bad side of humanity coming through Lex Luthor, because that's what he is.
Yeah.
And really bring that together and bring the relationship of Lois and Clark to light a little bit more. But I think, great film. I did enjoy it. I think it's one of the best films I've seen this year in the sort of blockbuster sense. And I'm very optimistic for the second one, which will probably be here in 2 to 3 years, like they always are.
Yep, there you go. So look forward to that one, because that's how long it takes to do all the CGI of all those destroying buildings, of course.
God, all the CGI.
That's a lot of glass that you've got to make pixels for. Jesus. Don't feel sorry for those guys.
Yeah. So I think we're coming to a natural end of this.
Yes.
I think we've gone over the main points. So this is the first blog we've done in a while, actually. I think
it is, we've got a bit lazy on the podcast.
Hopefully we'll
do some more.
Get some more up. I think we should sit down and do one about a TV show that I will not stop talking about, called Orphan Black.
I've watched a couple of episodes of this, or 3 episodes now.
So if you if you're stuck for a TV show to watch at the moment, watch Orphan Black. You will not regret it. Trust me on that, and we'll maybe talk about that in a couple of weeks.
Well, it's a completely unknown TV series. You probably wouldn't have heard of it at all. Like I say, it's Canadian series made by BBC America.
It's starting to get a bit of traction behind it, though, with Emmy's talk and everything. So you'll probably hear about it very soon. It's coming to BBC in the next few months. I'm not sure when it's airing, but if you can, watch it, and you will thank me.
Perhaps actually, maybe we'll line that up then with the first showing, the premiere on BBC Three. That might make sense, wouldn't it, to chat about it then? So why you should be watching it, to make sure you are.
There's a little recommendation there for me to talk you off till I'm blue in the face about Orphan Black. So thank you for joining us for our Man of Steel podcast. I've had a good time chatting about the film. I think I could probably chat about it for another 20 minutes, but I think we've got to a natural end. And send us any comments and thoughts. Yeah, make sure you leave comments and stuff about what you think about the film, and also Orphan Black, and any other recommendations as well. Any TV series that you've been watching or films that you think, hey, hang on, this should be worth chatting about. Definitely, I'd love to chat.
Because there's a lot of good stuff out there at the moment.
There's a lot of stuff good. Yeah, there's a lot of doing very well this year.
And also points like TV versus film, because I mean, one of the discussions we've been having is that we kind of think that TV is
I do think TV
sort
is
of winning the war at the moment quite a bit.
I wouldn't, arguably, film people say it's not a war. It never has been, but in my personal opinion, I do think TV is doing very well.
At the end of the day, you've got to split your time between watching a film or a TV program. So it is sort of ends up becoming.
They are different animals, but at the same time, you can't help but compare. Yeah,
so it'd be interesting to see value for money and everything, what you get for it. So maybe that's something we can chat about in a future podcast. Remember to follow us at Blog4K. Also, go to blog4k.net to check out the any. Blog posts.
I think my last post
podcasts
was about Game of Thrones and that evil episode that nobody will talk about.
Yeah, Game of Thrones. That's another thing.
God. And I am currently writing an Orphan Black spoiler-free post. So if you need any more further convincing to watch it, I will help you there. So,
So make sure you check those places out, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.